This video I'm going to go over the basics of masking in Illustrator. You should know ahead of time that masking moves all masked objects into the same layer that the mask itself lives on. Might not be a big deal for you, but sometimes if you go through a lot of work of labeling and putting specific things in layers, I just want to make you aware of that. Keep in mind you can always save out a separate document and use that one for masking. But first ask yourself if you really need a mask. If the only reason you're thinking about doing a mask is you just want to know what that would look like for print, there is an option up in the main menu where you go View and you go Trim View. And what that does is it just shows you what is inside of the artboard. You can see when I run the mouse over it, all that stuff is still there. So then you can just go View, go over it again, and that'll remove the check mark and bring it back to the way that it was. But if you do actually need a mask, then as always, you should make a backup copy of it, any document before manipulating it. One of the ways to think of the mask is think of it as a revealer, the thing that you actually make for the mask. So that'll probably be clearer when I show you here. So in this example, just want to clean this document up so that there is nothing showing here outside of the bleed. So to make a mask, what you need to do is you need to make sure that that mask is above everything that you are interested in masking. So typically the easiest way to do it is go to your layers and click on the very top layer and create a new layer. And then this way you know for sure it's on the very top of everything, right? Because it's the very top layer. It's going to have to be the very top thing. And then you just simply create a shape. And that shape can be pretty much any shape. And we'll talk a little bit about that more. And what I'm going to do to just make it really obvious what I'm doing here is I'm going to choose a color like green. And what I'm going to do is go right to the corner of my bleed and to the bottom corner of the bleed. And then that is going to be my mask. But right now, all it is just a rectangle that happens to live on the top layer. Now, a couple things. You have to select the mask and everything that you want to mask. So make sure that nothing is locked over here. If it is, simply unlock it and then go over here to Object, and if Unlock All is selectable, in other words black instead of grayed out, then select it as well. Okay, now make a selection of everything. I'll just draw a marquee around everything, and then I go to Object, go to Clipping Mask, and then to Make. And what was that green rectangle has now become the mask. And like I said earlier, if you think of that thing that you're making as a revealer, because it actually masked everything that was outside of that shape. Like I said, the only real bad thing from my perspective on the mask is if you had everything all laid out in these layers, there's nothing in those layers anymore. Everything was drawn up to this layer. Now, if you ever do that, and that is an issue for you, before you go any further, Command Z a couple times to get back to where you were. Okay, so right here, now I have everything in the individual layers. And in fact, what I'd probably do is Command Z one more time to get rid of this layer, save it, and then come back to an alternate version of the document and then do my mask. I'm going to redo the mask this time. Instead of selecting everything with the marquee, I'll go up to Select and I'll select All. because everything that's on this document I want to mask. Oh, actually, this brings up a good point. There is something over here, and if I don't want that to be masked, in fact, that's a common error that happens with masking, is you do a select all, you get something over here that you were working on, and it disappears, and you're wondering, what the heck happened here? So if I just simply shift click on it, it'll unselect that one particular thing. In fact, I'll leave it at this view so you can see. And then again, we go to Object, we go to Clipping Mask, we go Make, and you can see that because that item was not selected, it did not get masked. I want you to know that you can release a mask. So if I once again select everything and go to Object, Clipping Mask, and then Release, puts me back where I was, sort of, but everything is still on this one layer of masking. Let me just show you a couple other things. So I told you earlier that the mask can be just about any shape you want it to be. Let's go back in here and let's just goof around on this one right now. So I'm going to create, and again I have to be careful here, see if I can figure out which layer this is on. So it's on this layer. So technically speaking, I could make the mask on this layer if all I'm going to mask is just this. But I still do have to make sure that it's the topmost thing on the layer. So let me show you what can happen sometimes that can be kind of confusing. So I'm just going to create any old shape I want with the pen tool. And let's say that's the shape that I am going to use as my mask. Now sometimes you'll have another part, another graphic in here. Let me change the color of that. And you'll say, okay, well, I've got my shape here. I'm going to mask two things, the image and this thing right here. So I go to Object, I go to Clipping Mask, and I go Make, and see what it took the very top shape and made a mask out of it. So all you really have to remember, if you're working just in one layer, or you for whatever reason don't want to make a brand new layer at the top, is whatever you plan on using for the mask needs to be on top. And one way to do that is to control click on it, or right click, and go to Arrange and Bring to Front. And now when I do that, I will get the mask. Shortcut is Command 7, and there you go. It might interest you is you can move the mask, so you see how it's and move items within the mask. You can also change the shape of the mask. If I grab the direct selection tool, click on it, maybe grab an anchor point, I can move that anchor point, thus changing the shape of my mask. But if you don't remember that, that's no problem. Just release your mask, draw a brand new thing. One last thing is you can also even use typography that is outlined as a mask, and in fact there's even a way to do it without outlining the typography, but I'm not going to go into one-off weird situations for masking. So just go to YouTube and Google masking just in general. If you want specifics on masking, typography, enter that in. There's also a thing called layer masking that you may want to learn about, which is essentially like each layer could have a mask that works with it. So yeah, just some advanced stuff that you're more than welcome to look into.